Emma's world shattered when she saw the name. Michael Anderson, the man who vanished from her life 5 years ago, now alive because of her rare blood donation. His heart, which once broke hers, now beat with her blood in his veins. When he wakes, will Emma seek revenge or offer forgiveness to the man who owes her everything? Like and subscribe for more heartbreaking stories, and share your own second chance encounters below. The emergency room had been chaos that morning. A pile-up on the highway had sent 12 critically injured patients to St. Mary's within an hour. Emma had been on her third consecutive 12-hour shift, running on caffeine and determination when nurse manager Gloria cornered her in the supply closet. "We need donors, Emma. We're critically short on blood, especially rare types." Gloria's eyes had that determined look that brooked no argument. Emma sighed, rolling up her sleeve. "Fine. But I'm taking an extra pudding cup from the cafeteria." That had been a week ago. Now Emma felt lightheaded, and not from blood loss. Michael Anderson. The name on the chart blurred as her eyes welled with tears she refused to shed. 5 years. 5 years since she'd come home to their apartment to find it half empty, his drawers cleared out, his toothbrush gone. 5 years since she'd found that note on the kitchen counter. "I'm sorry, I can't do this anymore. Please don't look for me." No explanation, no goodbye, just 8 words that had demolished the life they'd built together. Emma had called in sick the next day, and the day after that. She'd waited by the phone that never rang, checked her email obsessively, reached out to mutual friends who seemed just as confused as she was. Michael had vanished without a trace. A month later, she'd packed up their apartment, donated his remaining belongings to charity, and moved across town to a smaller place. 6 months after that, she'd enrolled in nursing school. Healing others, she'd discovered, helped distract from her own unhealed wounds. And now, here he was, unconscious in a hospital bed, alive because of her blood. Emma forced herself to look at his face, thinner than she remembered, with new lines at the corners of his eyes. His dark hair was shorter, peppered with premature gray at the temples, and nasty gash ran across his forehead, held together with neat sutures. According to his chart, he'd been in a serious car accident, internal bleeding, concussion, broken ribs. He'd needed emergency surgery and multiple transfusions, her rare blood type, as it happened. "You know him?" Emma startled. Dr. Karim stood in the doorway, her intelligent eyes missing nothing. "No," Emma said automatically, then amended, "Yes, a long time ago." Dr. Karim nodded, not pushing. "I can reassign you if needed." Emma's instinct was to flee, to pass Michael's care to someone else, but something kept her rooted to the spot. Professional pride, perhaps, or perhaps something deeper, more primal. He'd left her with questions that had haunted her for years. Now, fate had delivered him back into her life. "I'll take him," Emma said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I can be professional." Dr. Karim studied her face. "Sometimes the hardest patients are the ones we know. Be careful with yourself, Emma." When Dr. Karim left, Emma checked Michael's adjusted his oxygen levels, and recorded his vitals. Her movements were automatic, practiced. The intimacy of nursing, the touching, the cleaning, the monitoring had long ago become routine. But nothing about this felt routine. Her fingers brushed his wrist as she checked his pulse, and she flinched at the contact. His skin was warm, real. Part of her had begun to wonder if their relationship had been a dream, a fantasy she'd constructed to explain the emptiness she sometimes felt. But here was proof. Michael Anderson existed. He breathed, his heart beat, his blood, her blood now flowed through his veins. Emma updated his chart and stepped back from the bed. She should leave, finish her rounds, check on her other patients, but her feet wouldn't move. "Why?" she whispered to his unconscious form. "Why did you leave like that?" Michael's monitors beeped steadily. No answer came. The door opened behind her, and Emma quickly wiped her eyes, composing her face into professional neutrality. "Nurse," a middle-aged woman with worried eyes, peeked in. "They said I could see my son now." Michael's mother. Emma recognized her from the few family gatherings they'd attended together. "Mrs. Anderson," Emma said, her voice carefully controlled. "Please come in." The woman looked at Emma blankly. No recognition in her eyes. Of course Emma had changed in 5 years. She'd cut her once-long hair into a practical bob, lost weight, started wearing contacts instead of the glasses she'd had before. "How is he?" Mrs. Anderson asked, moving to her son's bedside. "Stable," Emma replied. slipping into her professional role like armor. His vitals are improving. We expect him to regain consciousness soon. Mrs. Anderson nodded, grasping her son's limp hand. Thank you for taking care of him. Emma felt a bitter laugh rise in her throat and swallowed it down. It's my job, she said simply, then turned and walked out of the room before her composure cracked completely. Night shifts were usually Emma's favorite quieter. Fewer administrators roaming the halls, more time to actually care for patients rather than fill out paperwork. But tonight, the dimmed lights and hushed atmosphere only intensified her awareness of Michael's presence down the hall. She'd managed to avoid his room for the rest of her day shift, assigning tasks to other nurses when possible. But the night shift was understaffed, as usual, and there was no escaping her responsibility now. Just do your job, she muttered to herself, organizing her medication cart. He's just another patient. But when she entered room 217 to check his vitals, her practiced professional demeanor threatened to crumble. In the soft glow of the monitoring equipment, Michael looked so much like the man she'd once planned to spend her life with, the man who'd held her through her father's funeral, who'd surprised her with midnight picnics when she couldn't sleep, who'd promised forever and delivered 5 years of absence instead. His chart showed improvement. The transfusions, her blood had stabilized his condition. His color was better, breathing stronger. Emma recorded his vitals methodically, keeping her touch clinical and brief. You're doing better than expected, Mr. Anderson, she said aloud, partly to maintain her professional distance, partly because talking to unconscious patients was encouraged. Your body is responding well to treatment, to my blood, she thought but didn't say. A soft knock at the door made her turn. Dr. Karim stood there, looking as fresh at 2 a.m. as she had 12 hours earlier. Thought I'd check in before heading home, she said, taking the chart from Emma. And on you, as well. I'm fine, Emma said automatically. Dr. Karim raised an eyebrow. Most people aren't fine when caring for someone from their past, especially someone who clearly matters. Mattered, Emma corrected, past tense. If you say so. Dr. Karim checked Michael's pupils with a penlight. Good pupillary response. The CT scan showed the intracranial pressure is decreasing. He should regain consciousness within the next 24 hours. Emma nodded, trying to keep her expression neutral. 24 hours until she would have to face those eyes again, hear that voice. 24 hours to prepare herself. You know, Dr. Karim said casually, there's something poetic about your blood saving him. In some cultures, they'd say, your souls are now connected. We're not. In some culture, Emma replied sharply, we're in a hospital, and he's just a patient. Dr. Karim smiled gently. Of course, just an observation. She handed the chart back. Page me if his condition changes. After she left, Emma sank into the chair beside Michael's bed, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had kept her going was fading, leaving a bone-deep weariness in its wake. This isn't fair, she whispered to Michael's sleeping form. I was doing fine without you. I was finally okay. That wasn't entirely true. She'd built a life after Michael, a good life. Meaningful work, a few friends, a small apartment that felt like home. But there had always been a Michael-shaped hole in that life, questions that kept her awake some nights, trust issues that sabotaged potential relationships before they could begin. She'd dated occasionally, but nothing serious, nothing that threatened the walls she'd built around her heart. Emma checked her watch. She had rounds to finish, other patients who needed her. She couldn't sit here all night, watching him breathe. She stood, adjusting his blanket automatically. His hand twitched, fingers curling slightly. Emma froze, watching for further signs of consciousness, but his breathing remained steady, eyes closed. Just a reflex. Then, still, she'd need to note it in his chart. Increased MODA responses were a good sign. As she reached for the chart, she noticed something she'd overlooked before, a thin gold band on his left ring finger. Their wedding ring. Emma felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. He'd left her, abandoned their marriage, disappeared from her life but kept wearing his ring. What kind of cruel joke was that? She backed away from the bed, her hands shaking. For 5 years, she'd alternated between fury at his betrayal and worry that something terrible had happened to him. She'd checked obituaries, called hospitals, even briefly hired a private investigator before her savings ran out. Eventually, she'd had to accept the simplest explanation. He hadn't wanted her anymore. But the ring suggested something else, something more complicated. Nurse Williams, a nursing assistant, poked her head in. Mrs. Abernathy in 220 is asking for pain medication. Emma composed herself quickly. I'll be right there. She gave Michael one last look before leaving. Don't you dare die, she whispered fiercely. Not until you explain yourself. The rest of the night passed in a blur of routine tasks, medications, position changes, charting. Emma checked on Michael twice more, but there were no further signs of consciousness. Each time she entered his room, she felt the weight of their shared history, the unanswered questions hanging in the air between them. By the time her shift ended at 7 a.m., Emma was running on empty. She gave report to the day nurse, a cheerful woman named Patty who was blissfully unaware of Emma's connection to the patient in 217. He's improving steadily, Emma said, keeping her voice professional, showing increased reflexes overnight. Watch for signs of consciousness. Will do, Patty said. You look beat. Go home and get some sleep. Sleep. Emma almost laughed. How could she possibly sleep now? But she nodded, collected her things, and headed for the parking garage. The weight of the past 24 hours settling over her like a heavy blanket. In her car, she finally allowed herself a moment of weakness. She pressed her forehead against the steering wheel and let the tears come for the girl she'd been 5 years ago, for the woman she'd become, and for the man upstairs whose life she'd saved but who had once broken her heart beyond repair. Emma hadn't planned to return to the hospital until her next scheduled shift. But after tossing and turning for 3 hours in her apartment, she gave up on sleep. She showered, changed, and drove back to St. Mary's, telling herself she was just picking up the novel she'd left in her locker. The day shift was in full swing when she arrived. She nodded to colleagues, ignoring their curious glances. Off-duty nurses didn't typically hang around the hospital. Forget something? Gloria asked as Emma lingered by the nurse's station. Just a book, Emma replied, then hesitated. How's the patient Gloria checked the computer. Anderson. Improving. Starting to show more responsiveness. She gave Emma a curious look. Why the interest? Just curious. He was my patient last night. Emma turned away before Gloria could ask more questions. She should leave now, go home, force herself to sleep. Instead, she found herself walking toward room 217, drawn like a magnet. She paused outside the door, listening. Voices inside Michael's parents. Probably she should go. This wasn't her business anymore. Then she heard a familiar name that froze her in place. Double quotes. Wonder if he's tried to contact Emma since he's been back. Mrs. Anderson was saying, Margaret, you know what the doctor said. No upsetting topics until he's stronger. Mr. Anderson's voice was gruff with concern. I'm just saying, she deserves to know he's back. After everything the poor girl went through. Emma leaned closer to the partially open door, heart hammering. That's Michael's decision, not ours, Mr. Anderson replied. He had his reasons for leaving the way he did, for keeping her in the dark. Well, I never agreed with those reasons, Mrs. Anderson said firmly. She loved him, Robert, and he loved her. What happened wasn't fair to either of them. Emma pressed a hand to her mouth, stifling a gasp. What were they talking about? What reasons? What had happened? Life isn't fair, Mr. Anderson said. Michael did what he thought was right, what he had to do to protect. The conversation cut off as Patty entered the room, her cheerful voice announcing it was time for vital checks. Emma ducked around the corner, mind reeling. Protect who? Her. From what? She waited until Patty left, then slipped into an empty consultation room to collect herself. The Andersons' conversation replayed in her mind, raising more questions than answers. She'd spent 5 years believing Michael had simply fallen out of love with her, chosen to leave rather than work through whatever issues he'd been having. But his parents made it sound like something else entirely. Emma's pager buzzed a text from her friend Diane, asking if she wanted to meet for coffee. Emma sent a quick reply declining, then made a decision. She had to see Michael again. To look at him with these new questions in mind, she waited until she saw the Andersons leave for the cafeteria, then slipped into room 217. Michael lay as she'd left him that morning, still unconscious but looking less pale. The morning sun streamed through the window, highlighting the changes in him that she hadn't fully registered before. The gray in his hair, a thin scar along his jaw that hadn't been there before, and his hands. She'd always loved his hands, strong and capable, now marked with small scars and calluses that spoke of physical labor. So different from the office work he'd done before. What had happened to him in those 5 years? Almost without thinking, Emma reached for his left hand, the one with the wedding ring. The gold band was worn, scratched in places, not new. Then, he'd been wearing it all this time. Her fingers brushed against his, and she felt a jolt of familiarity, so strong, it made her eyes sting. Once, she'd known every line of these hands, every callus and scar. She'd held these hands through joy and grief, in passion and in comfort. "Why did you keep wearing it?" she whispered, touching the ring gently. "Why would you leave me but keep this?" She turned his hand over, examining his palm, and froze. There, across his palm, was a jagged scar that hadn't been there before, as though he'd grabbed something sharp or been cut deeply. Another mystery. Another change she couldn't account for. The monitors continued their steady beeping as Emma carefully placed his hand back on the bed. She stepped back, studying his face, searching for clues to the man he'd become in their years apart. "Did you think about me?" she asked softly. "Did you miss me at all? Or was it easy to start over without me?" For a moment, she thought she saw his eyelids flutter, but they remained closed. Emma sighed, checking her watch. The Andersons would return soon. She needed to go. At the door, she paused for one last look. "I built a life without you, Michael," she said, her voice stronger now. "Whatever your reasons were, I survived. Remember that when you wake up." As she turned to leave, she nearly collided with Dr. Karim, who raised an eyebrow but said nothing about finding Emma there off duty. "His latest scans look promising," Dr. Karim said instead, nodding toward Michael. "The swelling has decreased significantly. I expect he'll regain consciousness soon." Emma nodded, trying to look merely professionally interested. "That's good news, indeed." Dr. Karim studied her face. "The body is remarkable in its capacity to heal, isn't it? Even from the most devastating injuries." "The body, yes," Emma replied. "The heart is another matter." Dr. Karim's expression softened with understanding. "Ah, but the heart is just another muscle, Emma. Given time and proper care, it too can heal from almost anything." Emma wasn't so sure about that, but as she left the hospital and drove home, the questions raised by the Andersons' conversation and the sight of Michael's wedding ring kept circling in her mind. For 5 years, she'd lived with one version of their story. He'd left because he didn't want her anymore. But what if that wasn't the truth? What if there was another explanation for why the man who'd promised to love her forever had disappeared without a proper goodbye? And most importantly, what would she do with that information if she got it? Emma arrived for her evening shift with a strange sense of anticipation. All day, she'd been distracted, her mind returning again and again to the fragments of conversation she'd overheard, to the wedding ring Michael still wore, to the new scars that told of a life she knew nothing about. She'd rehearsed a dozen versions of what she would say when if he woke up during her shift. Cool professionalism seemed safest, but every practice sentence in her head ended up laced with the anger and hurt she'd carried for 5 years. "Focus on your job," she reminded herself as she changed into scrubs. "He's just a patient." But when she arrived at the nurse's station to receive report, Patty's first words shattered her composure. "Your guy in 217 has a visitor. His sister arrived from Seattle about an hour ago." Lily. Emma hadn't thought about Michael's younger sister in years. They'd been close once. Lily had even lived with them briefly after college while looking for a job. If anyone might have answers about Michael's disappearance, it would be Lily. "Thanks," Emma said, trying to sound casual. Any change in his condition? More responsive to stimuli, but still unconscious. Dr. Karim increased his pain medication. He seemed distressed during the last neurological check. Emma nodded, taking the charts. She'd start her rounds with the other patients. She decided, give herself time to prepare before facing Lily. But as she turned from the station, a familiar voice called her name. "Emma." "Oh my God, Emma." Lily Anderson stood in the hallway, her eyes wide with shock. Unlike Mrs. Anderson, she'd recognized Emma immediately. "Lily," Emma acknowledged, her voice carefully neutral. "I'm on duty, so you work here. You're Michael's nurse." Lily looked stunned. "Does he know? Has he seen you?" "He's still unconscious," Emma replied. "And yes, I'm one of the nurses assigned to his care." Lily stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Emma, I don't even know what to say. After everything that happened, I need to start my rounds." Emma interrupted, not ready for this conversation in the middle of the busy hallway. "Perhaps we can talk later." "No, we need to talk now." Lily grabbed Emma's arm, pulling her toward an empty family consultation room. This isn't a coincidence, Emma. You being here, taking care of Emmett's fate or something. Emma gently extracted her arm from Lily's grip. It's not fate, it's hospital staffing, and my professional obligation. But don't you see? This is your chance, both of your chances to finally, what, Lily? Emma's composure cracked. To finally get answers about why your brother walked out on our marriage without a word, to hear whatever excuse he's come up with for 5 years of silence. Lily's expression softened. Oh, Emma, you still don't know, do you? Know what? Emma demanded. Michael didn't just leave, Emma. He was trying to protect you. Emma shook her head. That's what your father was saying this morning. Protect me from what? Lily sank into a chair, suddenly looking exhausted. It's complicated, and not really my story to tell. But Michael never stopped loving you, Emma. Never. Then why he was in danger, which meant you were in danger too, as long as you were with him. Emma stared at her, disbelief warring with a strange, unwelcome hope. What kind of danger? He uncovered something at work: financial fraud, people losing their life savings. When he threatened to go public, he started getting threats. Not just against him, but against you too. Emma remembered Michael's job at the investment firm, how he'd become increasingly tense in the weeks before he left, taking phone calls in another room, working late. She'd attributed it to normal work stress. He could have told me, Emma said. We could have faced it together. Lily shook her head. The people involved were dangerous, Emma. Seriously dangerous. They knew where you lived, where you worked. They sent photos of you walking home, detailed your daily routines. Michael was terrified, so he just left, without a word. He thought a clean break would be safest for you. If they believed you knew nothing, had no contact with him, they'd leave you alone. Lily's eyes filled with tears. It killed him to do it, Emma. He loved you so much. Emma felt dizzy, her carefully constructed understanding of the past 5 years crumbling. I don't believe you, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. He tried to contact you, after things calmed down, about 2 years ago, but you'd moved, changed your number. He couldn't find you. I wasn't hiding, Emma said sharply. I was right here, in the same city, working at the largest hospital in the area. If he'd really wanted to find me, he was still being careful. Lily interrupted, still worried about bringing trouble to your door. She reached for Emma's hand. He never took off his ring, Emma. Not once in 5 years. Emma pulled her hand away, overwhelmed. This was too much, too fast. If what Lily was saying was true, then the narrative she'd lived with for 5 years, that Michael had simply stopped loving her, was a lie. But that also meant the anger that had sustained her, that had helped her rebuild her life without him, was built on a foundation of sand. I need to get back to work, she said, standing. My other patients, of course. Lily stood too. But, Emma, please, when he wakes up, give him a chance to explain, to apologize. He's suffered too, all these years without you. Emma didn't trust herself to speak. She nodded curtly and left the room, her mind churning. Part of her wanted to believe Lily, to accept that Michael had left out of love rather than its absence. But another part, the part that had been shattered by his abandonment, warned her against hope. Hope was dangerous. Hope could destroy her all over again. As she went through her rounds, checking vitals, administering medications, recording notes, Emma tried to process what she'd learned. If Michael had truly been trying to protect her, did that change anything? Did it erase 5 years of pain, of wondering what she'd done wrong, of learning to live without him? And even if she could forgive the leaving, could she forgive the silence, the years without a word, without a sign that he was even alive? By the time she reached room 217, Emma had no answers, only more questions. She hesitated outside the door, steeling herself. Inside, she knew, was not just a patient, but a past she'd thought long buried. With a deep breath, she pushed open the door and stepped inside. Lily had gone, leaving Michael alone in the dimly lit room. Emma moved efficiently through her nursing duties, checking his recording his vitals, adjusting his blanket. Her hands were steady, her face composed, but her mind was a storm of conflicting emotions. Your sister was here, she said aloud, knowing he couldn't hear her, but needing to fill the silence somehow. She told me quite a story. Michael's breathing remained steady, his eyes closed. The monitors beeped rhythmically. I'm not sure I believe it, Emma continued, marking his chart. It seems convenient, Heroic even. You left to protect me. She shook her head. 5 years without a word, Michael. Without a sign that you were even alive. She checked his pupils with a penlight dequel and reactive. A good sign. His brain was healing. I mourned you, she admitted softly. Not your death, but the death of us. Of everything we planned together. As she finished her assessment, Emma noticed something on the bedside table that hadn't been there before. Thick envelope with her name written on it in a familiar handwriting. Michael's handwriting. She glanced at the sleeping man, then at the envelope. Lily must have left it. For a moment, Emma considered ignoring it, maintaining the professional distance she'd been clinging to. But curiosity won out. She picked up the envelope, feeling its weight in her hands, before she could open it. Her pager buzzed in. Another patient needed pain medication. Emma hesitated, then slipped the envelope into her pocket. She'd read it later, when her shift was over and she could process whatever it contained in private. The rest of her shift passed in a blur of tasks, each accomplished with the automatic efficiency of a nurse with years of experience. But Emma's mind wasn't fully present. Her awareness kept returning to the envelope in her pocket, its edges pressing against her hip like a reminder of unfinished business. At 3 a.m., during a rare, quiet moment, Emma retreated to the break room with a cup of tea. The envelope sat on the table before her, still sealed. She traced her name on the front, written in the handwriting she'd once known better than her own. With a deep breath, she opened it. Inside was a letter, dated 3 years ago. Emma, I don't know if this will ever reach you. I don't even know if I should try, but I can't bear the thought of you believing I left because I stopped loving you. The truth is complicated and ugly. I discovered that the firm was defrauding clients, elderly people, retirees, families, saving for college, millions stolen through manipulated accounts. When I gathered evidence and threatened to go public, the threats began. Not just against me, but against you. They sent photos of you walking to the car, shopping at the market, visiting your father's grave. They described the blue dress you wore to dinner on Tuesday, the book you were reading on the porch on Sunday morning. They knew our lives intimately. When they broke into our apartment while we were out and left a dead bird on our bed, I knew I couldn't risk your safety any longer. I went to the police, but the people involved had connections there too. No one would help. Leaving you was the hardest thing I've ever done, but I still believe it was the only way to keep you safe. If they thought you knew nothing, had no connection to me anymore, they'd leave you alone. I've spent 3 years in hiding, working with a journalist to build a case. It's finally happening. Indictments, trials. When it's over, when I know it's safe, I want to find you. To explain in person, to beg your forgiveness, if you can find it in your heart. I know I have no right to ask anything of you. You've probably moved on, built a new life. Maybe there's someone else now who makes you happy, who deserves you more than I do. But I need you to know that I never stopped loving you. Not for a single day. I still wear our ring. I still sleep on my side of the bed, leaving space for you. I still talk to you in my head, sharing thoughts only you would understand, whatever you've believed these past years. Please know this. Every step away from you was a step I took unwillingly, forced by circumstances I couldn't control but refused to draw you into. I love you. I have always loved you. I will always love you. Michael. Emma set the letter down, her hands trembling. Tears she'd held back for years spilled silently down her cheeks. The story matched what Lily had told her, what she'd overheard from Michael's parents. A coherent narrative was emerging, one that painted Michael not as the villain of her life story but as someone who had made an impossible choice. But was it true? Or a carefully constructed excuse to ease his guilt? Emma folded the letter and returned it to the envelope. She couldn't process this now, not in the middle of her shift, not with Michael still unconscious down the hall. She wiped her eyes, composing herself before returning to her duties. As she approached Michael's room, she saw Dr. Karim exiting, a pleased expression on her face. "Good news," Dr. Karim said. "Mr. Anderson showed significant responsiveness during my examination. Eye-opening, hand-grasping. He's emerging from the coma." Emma's heart lurched. "He's waking up. It's a process. But yes, I'd expect periods of consciousness within the next several hours." Dr. Karim studied Emma's face. "Are you all right to continue? As his nurse, I can reassign him if needed." Emma hesitated. Part of her wanted to run, to avoid the moment when Michael would open his eyes and see her, but another part, the part that had read his letter and felt the ground shift beneath her feet, needed answers only he could provide. "I'll stay," she said. "I can handle it." Dr. Kareem nodded. "Sometimes the most difficult paths are the ones most worth walking. Page me when he regains consciousness." Alone again, Emma stood outside Michael's door, gathering her courage. Inside was the man who had broken her heart, but also the man who claimed to have sacrificed their life together to protect her. Inside was the past she'd tried to forget, and a potential future she'd never allowed herself to imagine. With a deep breath, she pushed open the door and stepped inside, ready to face whatever came next. The first time Michael opened his eyes, it was just past 4 a.m. Emma was checking his 4 when she felt him stir. She froze, watching as his eyelids fluttered, then opened. His gaze was unfocused at first, drifting around the room in confusion. "You're in the hospital, Mr. Anderson," Emma said, slipping into her professional voice. "You were in an accident. You're safe now." His eyes found her face, but there was no recognition there, just the fog of medication and brain injury. He blinked, slowly, then his eyes closed again. Emma released the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Just a brief moment of consciousness, normal for someone emerging from a coma. It didn't mean anything that he hadn't recognized her. It was better. This way gave her more time to prepare. The second time was an hour later. Emma was recording his vitals when his hand twitched, then moved to his face, fingers fumbling with the oxygen cannula. "Don't touch that," she said, gently moving his hand away. "It's helping you breathe." His eyes opened again, clearer this time. They fixed on her face, blinked, then widened with dawning recognition. His voice was a rasp, barely audible. Emma's heart hammered in her chest. "You're in the hospital, Mr. Anderson," she repeated, clinging to professionalism like a lifeline. "You were in an accident 3 days ago. You've had surgery for internal bleeding and you're recovering well." He continued to stare at her, confusion and disbelief warring on his face. "Emma," he said again, stronger this time. "You're here." Emma checked the monitors, avoiding his gaze. "I'm your nurse," she said flatly. "I need to page Dr. Kareem to let her know you're awake." She reached for the call button, but Michael's hand shot out with surprising strength, grasping her wrist. The touch sent a jolt through her, familiar and foreign all at once. "Wait," he rasped. "Please." Emma gently but firmly removed his hand. "You need to rest, Mr. Anderson. The doctor will want to examine you now that you're conscious." "Michael," he corrected, his voice pained. "I'm still Michael to you." Emma's professional mask slipped for a moment. "Are you?" she asked quietly. "After 5 years without a word, are you still anything to me?" Pain flashed across his face. "Not physical, Emma. Dr. Kareem will be here shortly," she interrupted, stepping back from the bed. "She explained your condition and prognosis." She turned to leave, desperate for escape, but his voice stopped her. "Your blood," he said. "They told me. Someone with a B negative blood saved my life." His eyes, those familiar blue eyes she'd once loved so deeply, found hers. "It was you, wasn't it?" Emma hesitated at the door. "Yes," she admitted. "It was me. Thank you," he whispered, "for saving my life. Even after, I'm a nurse." Emma replied stiffly, "It's what I do." She left then, nearly colliding with Dr. Kareem in the hallway. "He's awake," Emma said, conscious and oriented. "Recognized me right away." Her voice caught on the last words. Dr. Kareem squeezed her shoulder. "Take a break. I'll handle the examination." Emma nodded gratefully and retreated to the nurse's station, her hands shaking slightly as she updated Michael's chart. The moment she'd been dreading for days had happened, and somehow she'd survived it. But seeing recognition dawn in his eyes, hearing him say her name in that voice she'd thought she'd forgotten, it had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. She'd read his letter, heard Lily's explanation, pieced together the story of why he'd left, but seeing him, talking to him, made the abstract concrete again. This wasn't just a story, a justification. This was Michael, the man she'd once pledged her life to, looking at her with those eyes that still knew her. "You okay?" Gloria asked, appearing beside her with a cup of coffee. "You look like you've seen a ghost." In a way, she had. "Fine," Emma lied. "Just tired." "Dr. Kareem asked me to cover 217 for the rest of your shift," Gloria said. "Said you might need a break from that patient." Relief and something like disappointment warred in Emma's chest. "Thanks, I appreciate it. Anything I should know about him?" "Specific care instructions." Emma hesitated. "He's recovering well. just emerged from the coma, oriented and responsive. Gloria nodded, sipping her coffee. Must have been quite a moment, him waking up and seeing you there after all these years. Emma stared at her. What? Oh, honey. Gloria's expression was kind. Hospitals run on coffee and gossip. Dr. Karim didn't say anything, but Lily's been talking to anyone who'll listen about the miracle of her brother being treated by his long-lost wife. Emma closed her eyes briefly. Of course, in a hospital this size, she should have known the story would spread. Ex-wife, she corrected automatically, though they'd never actually divorced. Just ... separated by his unilateral decision. Still, wearing his ring though, isn't he? Gloria observed. And you saved his life with your blood. If that's not fate, I don't know what is. It's not fate, Emma said firmly. It's just ... an unfortunate coincidence. Gloria patted her hand. If you say so, honey. Anyway, I'll take care of Mr. Anderson for the rest of the shift. You focus on your other patients. As Gloria walked away, Emma sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation with Michael was fading, leaving her drained. He was awake. He knew she was here, and judging by the look in his eyes when he'd recognized her, the years apart hadn't dimmed whatever feelings he still had for her. The question was, what did she feel for him? Anger, certainly, hurt, confusion. But beneath those emotions, buried, under 5 years of protective scar tissue, was there something else? Something that explained why she'd never been able to fully let go. Why no other relationship had ever felt right. Why she still sometimes woke, reaching for him in the night. Emma didn't know. And with 8 hours left in her shift, 4 more, patients to care for, and Gloria handling Michael's room, she didn't have the luxury of figuring it out now. She'd face him again when she was ready, on her terms, and this time, she'd get the full truth, not from letters or second-hand accounts, but from Michael himself. Emma managed to avoid Michael for the remainder of her shift, focusing on her other patients with almost excessive attention to detail. By the time she clocked out, exhaustion dragged at her limbs, but sleep seemed impossible. Her mind was too full, her emotions too raw. She drove home on autopilot, showered, and collapsed into bed, where she stared at the ceiling for an hour before giving up. Coffee in hand, she curled up on her small balcony and watched the sunrise paint the city in gold and pink. 5 years ago, she and Michael had shared a similar balcony in their apartment across town. Sunday mornings had found them there, tangled together on a wicker love seat, planning their day, their future, their life. The memory ached like a bruise pressed too hard. Her phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Karim Anderson, asking for you. No pressure, your call. Emma set the phone down without responding. She needed time to think, to process everything she'd learned. Michael's letter had offered explanations, but not the whole story. Before she faced him again, she needed more information. 2 hours, and another cup of coffee later, Emma made a decision. She changed into jeans and a sweater, grabbed her laptop, and headed back to the hospital, not as a nurse this time, but as a woman seeking answers. The day shift was in full swing when she arrived. She nodded to colleagues, but avoided the 5th floor, where Michael's room was located. Instead, she headed to the hospital library, a quiet space primarily used by medical students and researchers. At a computer terminal, Emma began searching news archives for anything related to Michael's former employer, Westridge Investment Group. At first, she found nothing unusual: press releases, financial reports, the standard corporate communications. Then, she narrowed her search to include terms like fraud, investigation, and indictment. The results changed dramatically. 3 years ago, Westridge had been at the center of a major financial scandal. Senior executives had been indicted for a massive fraud scheme that had cost clients millions. The case had made headlines for weeks, then faded from public view as the slow machinery of justice ground forward. Michael's name appeared in several articles as a former employee who had provided key evidence to investigators. One piece mentioned that he had disappeared for his own safety. After initially bringing concerns to management, Emma read every article she could find, piecing together a timeline that matched what Michael had written in his letter. The threats, the fear, the impossible choice he'd faced, all of it was substantiated by the public record. She sat back, feeling slightly dazed. It was true, then. Michael hadn't left because he'd stopped loving her. He'd left to protect her, to keep her out of danger. The knowledge should have been a relief, but instead, it complicated everything. If he'd truly left out of love rather than its absence, what did that mean for the narrative she'd constructed around their separation? For the walls she'd built to protect herself from ever being hurt that way again? Emma closed the browser and left the library, her steps unconsciously taking her toward the 5th floor. She wasn't ready to see Michael yet, but she needed to talk to someone who knew the whole story. She found Lily in the hospital cafeteria, absently stirring a cup of soup while scrolling through her phone. "Can we talk?" Emma asked. Sliding into the seat across from her, Lily looked up, surprised, turning to cautious hope. "Of course, I was hoping you'd want to." "I read the letter," Emma said, "and I've been researching what happened at Westridge." Lily nodded. "Then you know he was telling the truth about the fraud?" "Yes, about the danger." Emma hesitated. "But why didn't he tell me? We could have faced it together, gone to the police together." "He tried the police," Lily interrupted. "They weren't helpful. Some were actually involved, and the people threatening him, they weren't making empty threats." She pulled out her phone, scrolled through photos, and passed it to Emma. The image showed Michael in a hospital bed, his face bruised, one arm in a cast. 2 years ago, Lily explained, they found him in Portland, beat him within an inch of his life as a warning. That's when he decided to disappear completely. Change his name, move every few months. Emma stared at the photo, her stomach twisting. Why didn't he reach out to me after the indictments, once it was safer? "He tried," Lily said, "last year, when the case was finally moving forward, but you'd moved, changed your number. The old apartment building had new management who wouldn't give him any information. Your parents had moved to Arizona. I was right here," Emma said, frustration edging her voice, "working at the biggest hospital in the city. If he'd really wanted to find me, he was still being careful," Lily insisted. "Still worried about bringing trouble to your door. And ... double quotes," she hesitated. "I think he was afraid of what that you'd moved on, found someone else, that you wouldn't want to see him after what he'd done." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "He never forgave himself for leaving, Emma, even knowing it was to protect you. It broke something in him." Emma looked away, her own eyes stinging. "I thought he just stopped loving me," she admitted, "that I wasn't enough." "Oh, Emma," Lily reached across the table, squeezing her hand, "that was never it. Never. He loved you so much it terrified him, enough to give you up to keep you safe." Emma wiped her eyes. "And now, why is he back in the city?" "The trial is finally over. The last defendant was sentenced 2 months ago. Michael thought it was finally safe to come home, to try to find you." Lily smiled sadly. "And then he got T-boned by a delivery truck his 3rd day back." Emma gave a choked laugh. "The universe has a strange sense of humor, or fate," Lily suggested, "bringing you back together in the most unexpected way." Emma wasn't ready to call it fate, but she couldn't deny the strange symmetry of it all. Michael's blood had once flowed through her veins in moments of passion. Now her blood flowed through his, keeping him alive. "He's asking for you," Lily said gently, "not as his nurse, as Emma." Emma nodded slowly. "I know, I just ... I need a little more time." "Of course," Lily squeezed her hand again, "but Emma, for what it's worth, I've never seen my brother look at anyone the way he looked at you. Not before, and certainly not in the 5 years since." Emma stood, emotions threatening to overwhelm her. "Thank you for talking to me, for filling in the gaps. Anytime." Lily smiled. "We were friends once, remember? I've missed that, too." As Emma walked away, her mind was a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts and emotions. The anger she'd nursed for 5 years was still there, but it was changing shape, its edges softening as understanding grew. Michael had left her, yes, but not because he'd stopped loving her, because he'd loved her too much to risk her safety. It didn't erase the pain of those years alone, the doubt, the rebuilding of her life from the ashes of their relationship, but it changed the meaning of it all. And now she had a choice to make. Walk away, preserve the independence she'd fought so hard for, or step back into the fire that had once been them, risking everything all over again. Emma went home, changed into fresh clothes, and drove to the small cemetery on the outskirts of the city. She hadn't visited her father's grave in months, but today she felt drawn there, needing the quiet wisdom he'd always provided in life. The October afternoon was cool but sunny, the trees ablaze with autumn colors. Emma sat on the small bench, beside her father's headstone, tracing the carved letters of his name with her eyes. I could use your advice, Dad, she said softly. Everything I thought I knew, it's all turned upside down. She told him about Michael, about the discovery in the hospital, about everything she'd learned. Her father had liked Michael, had welcomed him into their family without reservation. Before he died, he'd pulled Emma aside at their wedding reception and told her, "He's a good man, Emmy. He'll take care of you." And in his own way, perhaps Michael had been trying to do just that. "I don't know what to do," she admitted to the silent stone. "Part of me wants to forgive him, to believe his reasons were good enough. Another part is still so angry about those 5 years, about making that choice for both of us, without even telling me." A cool breeze rustled the leaves overhead. Emma closed her eyes, remembering her father's favorite advice. "Listen to your heart, but take your brain along for the consultation." Her heart was a confused jumble of emotions. Her brain wasn't much clearer, but there was one thing she knew with certainty: she needed to hear the full story from Michael himself, not from letters or second-hand accounts, but face to face, with nothing held back. "Thanks for listening, Dad," she said, standing and brushing leaves from her jeans. "I think I know what I need to do next." Back in her car, Emma made a decision. She would see Michael tomorrow, on her day off, not as his nurse, but as the woman who had once been his wife, the woman who deserved the whole truth. That night, she slept better than she had in days. The weight of indecision lifted. Whatever happened next, at least she was choosing her path rather than letting circumstances dictate it. The next morning, Emma dressed with care, not to impress, but to armor herself with confidence. Jeans, a soft blue sweater her father had given her the Christmas before he died, simple boots. She pulled her hair back, applied minimal makeup, and drove to the hospital with a strange calm settling over her. Michael's room was on the far end of the 5th floor. Emma took the stairs instead of the elevator, giving herself time to prepare. At his door, she paused, taking a deep breath before knocking softly and entering. Michael was sitting up in bed, looking stronger than he had the day before. His face lit up when he saw her, then quickly composed itself into a more cautious expression. "Emma," he said, her name still sounding like a prayer on his lips. "You came." "I did." She remained by the door, maintaining distance. "Lily said you wanted to talk to me." "Yes." He gestured to the chair beside the bed. "Please." Emma hesitated, then moved forward and sat, her posture stiff, hands clasped in her lap. "I've read your letter," she said, "and I've done some research about what happened at Westridge." Michael nodded. "Then you know why I left." "I know what happened," Emma corrected. "I know about the fraud, the threats, the danger. But I don't know why you didn't tell me, why you didn't give me a choice." Pain flickered across his face. "I wanted to. God, Emma. Every day I wanted to call you, to explain, to beg you to understand." "Then why didn't you?" "Because they were watching you." His voice was raw with remembered fear. "Following you. They made it very clear what would happen if I involved you in any way." Emma remembered the dead bird Michael had mentioned in his letter. "You could have found a way. A note with more explanation. A message through someone we trusted." "I considered everything," Michael said, his hands twisting the sheet. "But any connection between us put you at risk. These weren't people who made idle threats, Emma." He pushed up the sleeve of his hospital gown, revealing a jagged scar that ran from his wrist halfway up his forearm. 2 years ago, they found me in Portland. This was their message." Emma stared at the scar, her nurse's eyes automatically assessing the severity of the original wound. "Lily showed me a photo," she said. "She said they nearly killed you. They wanted me to know they could find me anywhere." Michael's voice was flat. "That they hadn't forgotten, that if I ever contacted you or went public with what I knew, you'd be next." "But the trial happened anyway," Emma pointed out. "The truth came out. Because I found help, a journalist with connections to the FBI. Together we built a case that was too big to ignore, too public to shut down. It took years, Emma, years of looking over my shoulder, changing names, moving every few months." Emma tried to imagine it: Michael alone, hunted, living in constant fear. It was so different from the narrative she'd constructed, where he'd simply walked away to a better life without her. "Why are you back now?" she asked. "After all this time." "The last defendant was sentenced 2 months ago. The organization is dismantled. I hoped it might finally be safe." His eyes met hers, vulnerable and honest. "And I wanted to find you. To explain. To see if there was any chance you could forgive me." "You're still wearing your ring," Emma observed. nodding toward his left hand. Michael glanced down at the gold band. I never took it off. Not once in 5 years. His voice softened. You were my wife, Emma. In my heart, you always will be. The words hung in the air between them, fraught with meaning, with history, with possibility. I built a life without you, Emma said finally. I had to. I couldn't just wait for someone who might never come back. I know, Michael said, and I'm so proud of you. Becoming a nurse, helping others, it suits you. It wasn't easy, Emma admitted. After you left, I was lost. Nursing gave me purpose again, a way to feel in control when everything else had fallen apart. Michael's eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry, Emma. If there had been any other way, that's just it, Emma interrupted. I don't know if there was another way or not, because you never gave me the chance to figure it out with you. You made that decision alone. To protect you, Michael insisted. Maybe. Or maybe because you didn't trust me enough to handle it, to be strong enough. The accusation hung between them, sharp-edged and honest. You're right, Michael said after a long moment. I didn't trust that we could find a solution together. I was so terrified of losing you that I lost you anyway. His voice broke. It's the greatest regret of my life. Emma felt tears prick her own eyes. 5 years, Michael, 5 years of wondering what I did wrong, why I wasn't enough, if you were even alive. I know. His voice was ragged. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it up to you, if you'll let me. Emma stood abruptly, emotions threatening to overwhelm her. I don't know what I want yet. This is a lot to process. Michael nodded, not pushing. I understand. But Emma, he caught her gaze, holding it. I never stopped loving you. Not for a single day. Emma held his gaze for a long moment, then turned and walked to the door. At the threshold, she paused. I'm off today and tomorrow. I won't be your nurse anymore. Will I see you again? The vulnerability in his voice nearly broke her. Emma hesitated. I don't know yet, she answered honestly. I need time to think. She closed the door softly behind her, her heart pounding. She'd gotten what she came for, the truth, directly from Michael. Now she had to figure out what to do with it. As she walked down the hospital corridor, Emma felt strangely lighter. The truth hadn't erased the pain of the past 5 years, but it had transformed it into something different, something she could finally begin to understand. Whether that understanding would lead to forgiveness or something more remained to be seen. Emma spent her days off in a strange limbo, alternating between restless activity and periods of deep reflection. She cleaned her apartment from top to bottom, went for a long run, called her mother in Arizona, and deliberately avoided thinking about Michael. But in quiet moments, his words echoed in her mind. I never stopped loving you, not for a single day. By the evening of the second day, Emma knew she needed more information before she could decide what to do next. Michael's explanation had filled in many blanks, but there were still gaps in the story, details that didn't quite add up. In the morning, she drove to the hospital again, but instead of heading to Michael's room, she went to the medical records department. As a nurse, she had legitimate access to patient files for those under her care and, technically, Michael had been her patient. Emma wasn't proud of using her position this way, but she needed to see his complete medical records to understand what had happened to him in the years they'd been apart. In a quiet corner of the records room, Emma reviewed Michael's file. The car accident that had brought him to St. Mary's had been serious internal bleeding, concussion, broken ribs. But it was his medical history before the accident that caught her attention. 2 years ago, an ER visit in Portland, multiple contusions, 3 broken ribs, a fractured ulna, knife wound to the left forearm. The clinical description matched the scar Michael had shown her 18 months ago. Another, a visit in Seattle, concussion, facial contusions. The intake notes included a comment that the patient had been evasive about the cause of injuries. A year ago, a clinic visit in Spokane, recurring headaches, suspected post-concussion syndrome. The doctor had noted concerns about the patient's mental health, recommending therapy for signs of PTSD. Emma sat back, stomach churning. The medical records confirmed Michael's story. He hadn't just been hiding, he'd been hunted, attacked, living in constant fear, all while she'd been here, safely rebuilding her life, believing he'd simply abandoned her for greener pastures. She closed the file, guilt and sympathy warring with the anger she'd nursed for years. Understanding Michael's reasons didn't automatically erase the pain of his absence, but it did complicate her feelings about it. As she left the records department, Emma literally bumped into Dr. Kareem in the hallway. "Emma," Dr. Kareem said, steadying her, "I didn't expect to see you today. Everything all right?" "Yes, I just, Emma hesitated. "I was looking at some records." Dr. Kareem's perceptive eyes studied her face. "Mr. Anderson's records, perhaps?" Emma flushed. "I needed to understand what happened to him before the accident." "I see." Dr. Kareem didn't seem surprised or judgmental. "And did you find what you were looking for?" "Some of it," Emma admitted. "His injuries in Portland, Seattle?" "Yes, those were concerning," Dr. Kareem agreed. "When he was admitted, I noticed the pattern of old injuries. They told a story of someone who'd been through significant trauma." Emma nodded. "He was being threatened, attacked, because of something he uncovered at work. That would explain it." Dr. Karim's expression softened. "You know, Emma, in my experience, people rarely make extreme choices without extreme reasons." "You mean leaving me?" Emma said. "I mean disappearing so completely. Most people who leave relationships don't change their names, move constantly, cut all ties." Dr. Kareem touched Emma's arm gently. "Whatever his reasons, they must have felt compelling to him." "They were," Emma acknowledged. "He was trying to protect me. A noble intention," Dr. Kareem observed, "though perhaps misguided in execution." Emma gave a small, sad smile. "That's one way to put it. Have you spoken with him? Really spoken? Not as nurse and patient?" "Yesterday," Emma said, "he told me everything. Or at least, his version of everything." "And do you believe him?" Emma considered the question. "Yes," she said finally. "I believe he thought he was doing the right thing. I believe he was scared. For me, I just don't know if that's enough." Dr. Kareem nodded thoughtfully. "Enough for what? To forgive him? To... I don't know what he wants from me now." "Perhaps the better question is what you want from him," Dr. Kareem suggested. "Forgiveness is a gift you give yourself as much as the other person. But beyond forgiveness... that's something only you can determine." Emma hadn't allowed herself to think that far ahead. Forgiveness seemed challenging enough. Anything beyond that felt impossible to contemplate. "He's being discharged tomorrow," Dr. Kareem said. "His recovery has been remarkably quick. His sister will be taking him to their parents' home for continued recuperation tomorrow." The knowledge created an unexpected urgency in Emma's chest. Once Michael left the hospital, the strange bubble that had contained their reunion would burst. He would return to the real world, a world where they were no longer nurse and patient, no longer bound by the artificial constraints of the hospital setting. "Thank you for telling me," Emma said. Dr. Kareem smiled. "You saved his life, you know, not just with your blood, but with your care. Whatever happens next, that's something remarkable." As the doctor walked away, Emma stood frozen in the hallway, torn between conflicting impulses. Part of her wanted to run to Michael's room, to see him again before he left. Another part wanted to let him go, to maintain the distance she'd fought so hard to establish in the years without him. In the end, she did neither. Instead, she walked to the chapel, a small, quiet space on the hospital's first floor. She wasn't particularly religious, but she needed somewhere to think, to process everything she'd learned. The chapel was empty. Sunlight streaming through stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns on the simple wooden pews. Emma sat in the back row, closing her eyes, trying to quiet the storm of emotions inside her. Michael had suffered. He'd been hurt, hunted, alone. But so had she, in a different way. They'd both lost 5 years they could never get back. The question now was whether they would lose the future as well. That evening, Emma returned to the hospital for her scheduled shift. She'd been assigned to a different floor, away from Michael's room, a deliberate scheduling choice by Gloria, who'd given her a knowing look when she'd checked the assignments. "Thought you could use some space," Gloria had said. Emma had nodded gratefully, but as the night progressed, she found herself distracted, checking the time frequently, aware that, in less than 12 hours, Michael would be discharged. Their strange reunion would end as abruptly as it had begun, unless she chose to see him again. Around 2 a.m. During a lull in her duties, Emma found herself standing in the elevator, finger hovering over the button for the 5th floor. Before she could second-guess herself, she pressed it. The 5th floor was quiet, most patients sleeping. Emma nodded to the night nurse at the station, a new hire named Tanya, who didn't know her history with Michael. "Just checking on a former patient," Emma explained casually. "Anderson in 217. How's he doing? Tanya checked the computer. Stable. Vitals good. Had some pain earlier but refused additional medication. She glanced up. You want me to tell him you stopped by? No, that's okay, Emma said quickly. I don't want to wake him if he's sleeping. He's not sleeping, Tanya said. Call light came on about 20 minutes ago. Wanted some water. Said he was having trouble sleeping. Emma hesitated, then made a decision. I'll stop in, then. Just for a minute. She walked down the familiar corridor, her heart beating faster with each step. At room 217, she paused, took a deep breath, and knocked softly before entering. Michael was sitting up in bed, a book open on his lap. He looked up when she entered, surprise and something like hope lighting his face. Emma, he said. I didn't expect to see you. I'm working tonight, she explained, remaining by the door. Different floor. I just, thought I'd check how you're doing before you're discharged. Better, he said. Still sore, but better. He hesitated, then added, I would have healed faster if you'd been my nurse these past couple days. The compliment caught her off guard. You had good care, she said. The best care, he agreed, but not you. The simple statement hung in the air between them, laden with meaning beyond the professional context. Emma moved into the room, stopping at the foot of his bed. You should be sleeping. Tomorrow will be tiring. I can't sleep, Michael admitted. Too much on my mind. Your injuries. You, he said simply. Always you. Emma looked away, uncomfortable with the naked emotion in his eyes. Michael, I'm sorry, he said quickly. I don't mean to pressure you. I just, I don't know when I'll see you again, after tomorrow. The question had been implicit in their interactions since he'd regained consciousness. What happens next? Where do we go from here? I don't know either, Emma admitted. Michael nodded, accepting her uncertainty. I'll be at my parents' for a few weeks, recuperating. After that, I've rented an apartment downtown. I'm staying in the city. The information surprised her. You're not leaving again? No, Michael said firmly. I'm done running. This is my home. Our home, he corrected. The city where we met, where we fell in love. A lot has changed in 5 years. Emma pointed out. Yes, Michael agreed. We've both changed, but some things haven't. His eyes held hers. I still love you, Emma. I never stopped. Emma had heard the words before, in his letter, from his lips, 2 days ago. But somehow, in the quiet of the night, they landed differently, more real, more immediate. I don't know what to do with that, she confessed. You don't have to do anything, Michael said. I'm not asking for decisions tonight. I just, wanted you to know. Before I leave tomorrow. Emma moved to the side of his bed, close enough to see the flecks of darker blue in his eyes, the new lines at their corners, the silver threading his dark hair at the temples. He looked older, wearier, but fundamentally still Michael, her Michael, once upon a time. I read your medical records, she admitted. I saw what happened to you in Portland, Seattle. Michael's expression tightened. You shouldn't have had to see that. I needed to understand, Emma said. To know if what you told me was true. And now that you know, I believe you were in danger, she said. That you were hurt, hunted. I believe you thought you were protecting me. I was, Michael insisted. They would have hurt you to get to me. Maybe, Emma acknowledged. Or maybe together we could have found another solution. Michael was quiet for a moment. I've thought about that too, he finally said. Whether there was another way. Whether I made the right choice. He looked down at his hands. I don't know, Emma. I just know that the thought of anything happening to you because of me, I couldn't bear it. The raw honesty in his voice touched something in Emma. Some part of her that had never quite stopped loving him despite everything. I was so angry with you, she whispered, for so long. You had every right to be, Michael said. You still do. It's not that simple anymore, Emma admitted, knowing why you left. It changes things. Hope flickered in Michael's eyes. Changes them how? I don't know yet, Emma said honestly. I'm still figuring that out. Michael nodded, not pushing. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere this time, I promise. The promise hung between them, tentative and fragile. Emma wanted to believe it. After 5 years of silence, 5 years of rebuilding her life without him, could she trust him again? Could they find their way back to each other? Or was too much broken to ever be repaired? I should go, she said. I have other patients. Michael nodded, disappointment clear in his eyes but voice steady. Thank you for coming to see me. At the door, Emma paused, looking back at him. In the soft glow of the bedside lamp, with his guard down and his love for her written plainly on his face, he looked like the Michael she'd married, the Michael who'd held her through her father's funeral, who'd danced with her in their tiny apartment kitchen, who'd promised to love her forever. Maybe he'd kept that promise after all, in his own way. "Goodbye, Michael," she said softly. "Not goodbye," he corrected gently. "Just good night." Emma slipped out of the room, her heart beating a complicated rhythm of fear and hope and something else she wasn't ready to name yet. Michael was discharged the next morning while Emma was home, sleeping after her night shift. She told herself it was better this way, no awkward goodbyes, no pressure to make decisions she wasn't ready to make. But a small part of her was disappointed she hadn't seen him one last time in the controlled environment of the hospital. She slept fitfully, dreaming of Michael not as he was now, but as he'd been 5 years ago, young and whole and hers. In the dream, they were in their old apartment, Michael packing a suitcase while Emma begged him to stay. "I have to go," Dream Michael kept saying. "It's the only way to keep you safe." Emma woke, feeling unsettled, the dream lingering like a premonition. She made coffee, checked her phone. No messages from the hospital, from Lily, from Michael. Not that she'd expected any. They had no formal connection anymore. No reason to be in contact unless she chose to reach out. 3 days passed. Emma worked her shifts, went for runs, had dinner with a friend from nursing school. She didn't mention Michael, didn't talk about the strange reunion that had appended her carefully constructed life, but he was always there in her thoughts, questions about him lurking at the edges of her consciousness. Where was he staying now? How was his recovery progressing? Was he thinking of her too? On the 4th day after Michael's discharge, Emma was leaving the hospital after her shift when she noticed a man in the packing garage, leaning against a car a few spots away from hers. Something about his posture, his attention focused on the hospital entrance, set off alarm bells. Emma slowed her pace, studying him from a distance, middle-aged, wearing an expensive-looking suit that somehow didn't quite fit his bulky frame. He wasn't hospital staff or a patient she'd have recognized. Him, a visitor, perhaps, waiting for someone. But as she watched, he checked his watch, then made a call. "Still nothing," she heard him say. "Anderson hasn't shown up yet." Anderson. Michael's name sent a chill through Emma. She ducked behind a concrete pillar, heart pounding. "Yeah, I'll wait," the man continued. "He's got to show up eventually. Sister visits every day." Emma's mind raced. Who was this man? Why was he looking for Michael? The trial was over, the criminals in prison. Unless not everyone had been caught, or someone was seeking revenge. The man ended his call and lit a cigarette, still watching the hospital entrance. Emma remained hidden, weighing her options. She could call security, but what would she say? The man wasn't doing anything overtly suspicious. She could ignore it, go home, assume it was nothing. But Michael's scars flashed in her mind, the jagged line across his forearm, the evidence in his medical records of repeated violence. He'd been hurt before because of what he knew, what he'd exposed. What if it was happening again? Decision made, Emma slipped back into the hospital through a side entrance. Inside, she found a quiet corner and called Lily, whose number she'd gotten during their cafeteria conversation. "Emma." Lily sounded surprised. "Is everything okay?" "I'm not sure," Emma said quietly. "There's a man in the packing garage, asking about Michael. Waiting for him, or maybe for you. Something feels off." "What does he look like?" Lily's voice sharpened. Emma described the man, the expensive suit, the conversation she'd overheard. "That sounds like one of them," Lily said, fear evident in her voice. "The people who were after Michael before. But that doesn't make sense. They're all supposed to be in prison." "Maybe not all of them," Emma suggested. "Is Michael with you now?" "No, he's at our parents' house. I was just about to drive over to visit him." Lily hesitated. "Emma, if they've found him again, do your parents have security?" Emma asked. "Cameras, alarms, basic stuff. Nothing serious." Lily's voice trembled. "I need to warn him. To get him somewhere safe." Emma made a quick decision. "Don't go to the hospital parking garage. The man's watching the entrance." "Is there someone who can stay with Michael while you figure out what to do?" "My mom's there, but she's not. She wouldn't be much help if someone tried to hurt him." Lily sounded increasingly panicked. "I need to get over there now." "Wait," Emma said. "Let me help. I'm off duty, and no one's watching for me. I can drive by your parents' house, check if anything seems suspicious. Maybe call the police if necessary. He would do that. Lily sounded surprised. After everything, Emma was a bit surprised herself, but she knew with certainty that she couldn't just go home. Pretend she hadn't seen the man or heard his conversation. Whatever had happened between her and Michael, she couldn't stand by if he was in danger. Yes, she said simply. Text me the address. And Lily, don't call Michael yet. If someone's watching your parents' house, they might be monitoring calls too. 10 minutes later, Emma was driving through an upscale neighborhood on the north side of the city. She'd changed out of her scrubs into street clothes kept in her locker for emergencies, hoping to look like just another resident if anyone was watching. The Andersons' house was a handsome colonial with a well-kept yard. Nothing seemed immediately suspicious. No unfamiliar cars parked on the street. No obvious signs of surveillance. But as Emma drove slowly past, she noticed a man sitting in a parked car about half a block away, reading a newspaper. Something about the way he held it, too high and too still, suggested he wasn't actually reading. Emma drove past without slowing, turned at the next corner, and parked. She called Lily again. I think there's someone watching the house, she reported. A man in a car down the street. And there was definitely someone waiting at the hospital for you or Michael to show up. Oh God, Lily breathed. What do we do? Should I call the police and tell them what? That a man is sitting in a car reading a newspaper? Emma shook her head, though Lily couldn't see it. We need more information first. She thought quickly. Is there a back entrance to your parents' property? A way to get in unseen from the street? Yes, through the neighbor's yard. Mrs. Keller, she's known us forever. Wouldn't think twice about letting someone through. Good. I'm going to try to get to the house that way and warn Michael directly. In the meantime, don't come here. Don't call the house. Stay somewhere public and safe. Emma, this is dangerous, Lily protested. These people, they hurt Michael before, badly. I know, Emma said quietly. I saw his medical records, remember? But I'm just going to talk to him, figure out what's happening. Nothing conspicuous. After ending the call, Emma sat for a moment, questioning her own judgment. Was she overreacting? Misinterpreting an innocent situation because of what she knew about Michael's past? But her instincts, the same ones that had saved patients when vital signs were still normal but something just felt wrong, were screaming that there was danger here. And whether or not Michael was still part of her life, she couldn't ignore that warning. Emma got out of her car and walked casually down the street, as if heading to visit a friend. At Mrs. Keller's house, she knocked on the door, prepared with a story about being a nurse colleague of Lily's, needing to drop off some medication for Michael. To her relief, the elderly woman who answered didn't ask many questions, just nodded and led her through the house to the back door. The Andersons are right through that hedge, she said. Tell Margaret I'll bring over some of my chicken soup tomorrow. Does wonders for healing. Emma thanked her and slipped through the hedge separating the properties, heart pounding with a mixture of fear and something that felt strangely like exhilaration. She was going to see Michael again, and possibly save him from danger. Again, the universe really did have a strange sense of humor. The Andersons' backyard was immaculate. Flower beds neatly mulched for winter, a stone patio with furniture covered against the coming cold. Emma moved quickly across the lawn to the back door, where she knocked softly, hoping Mrs. Anderson would answer, rather than a housekeeper or caregiver who might not recognize her. The door opened, and Emma found herself face to face with Michael, himself, leaning on a cane, eyes widening in shock at the sight of her. Emma, his voice was barely above a whisper. What are you? We need to talk, she interrupted, glancing over her shoulder. Privately, it's important. Something in her expression must have conveyed the urgency. Because Michael stepped back without further questions, allowing her into the house. He led her through a spacious kitchen to a small study off the main hallway, closing the door behind them. What's wrong? He asked immediately. Are you okay? Emma almost smiled at that. His first concern was for her, even as she showed up unexpectedly at his parents' house. I'm fine, she assured him. But I think you might not be. Quickly, she told him about the man in the parking garage, the one watching the house, the conversation she'd overheard. Michael's face grew increasingly grave as she spoke. When she finished, he sank into a leather armchair, running a hand through his hair. I was afraid of this, he said quietly. They had connections I didn't know about, people on the outside, who? Emma asked, sitting across from him. I thought everyone involved was in prison. The main players, yes, but organizations like theirs, They're like hydras. Cut off one head, two more grow in its place. Michael's expression was haunted. I should have known they'd find me eventually. What do we do? Emma asked. Call the police, the FBI. Michael shook his head. Not yet. We need more information first. If these are just hired thugs watching for an opportunity, going to the authorities might spook them into acting rashly. He looked at her, really looked at her, as if just registering the reality of her presence. Emma, you shouldn't be here. If they saw you come in, they didn't, she assured him. I came through your neighbor's yard, and I was careful at the hospital too. Michael shook his head, a mix of admiration and concern in his eyes. You always were resourceful, but this is dangerous, Emma. These people, what they did to me in Portland, ... I know, Emma said softly. I saw your records, remember, but they don't know who I am. I'm just a nurse who treated you at the hospital. If they've been watching for any length of time, they might have seen you visit, made connections. Michael's hand clenched on the arm of the chair. I can't let you be involved in this. I already am involved, Emma pointed out. And right now, we need to focus on keeping you safe. The phrase echoed between them, an ironic reversal of the dynamic that had separated them 5 years ago. Now it was Emma trying to protect Michael, not the other way around. Michael seemed to recognize the parallel, to a faint smile touching his lips despite the gravity of the situation. Look at us, he said softly. Full circle. Emma didn't allow herself to dwell on the implications. Where are your parents? Dad's at his club, golf, mom's at her book group. They'll be back around 6. Good, Emma said, relieved they weren't in immediate danger. Where's your phone? Michael gestured to a device on the desk. Why? We need to check if anyone's been monitoring your calls, texts, and we need to contact Lily without using the phone. She's worried sick. As she spoke, Emma moved to the window, carefully peering through the blinds at the street. The man in the car was still there, still pretending to read his newspaper. He hasn't moved, she reported. Just watching. Surveillance then, Michael said. Not an immediate threat, but they're establishing patterns, waiting for an opportunity. The calm, analytical way he assessed the danger spoke volumes about the life he'd been living for 5 years, always watching, always calculating risks. You need to leave, Michael said suddenly. Go back the way you came, through Mrs. Keller's yard. I'll handle this. How? Emma challenged. You can barely walk without a cane. And you can't stay here. Your parents could be in danger too. Michael's expression hardened. I'll figure something out. I always do. Not alone, Emma said firmly. Not this time. The words hung between them, weighted with meaning beyond their immediate situation. Not alone. Not anymore. Michael stared at her, a complex mix of emotions crossing his face: gratitude, disbelief, hope, fear. Emma, why are you doing this? After everything. Because it's the right thing to do, she said simply. Though they both knew it was more complicated than that. A soft noise from outside the study made them both freeze. Michael raised a finger to his lips, then motioned for Emma to move behind the door. He gripped his cane tighter, holding it like a weapon. The door opened slowly, and Emma tensed, ready to act, but it was only Mrs. Anderson, looking startled to find her son in a defensive posture. Michael, what on earth? Her gaze fell on Emma, and her eyes widened. Emma, is that you? Hello, Mrs. Anderson, Emma said, stepping forward. I'm sorry to intrude like this. Nonsense, dear. You're always welcome here. The older woman looked between them, sensing the tension. What's going on? You both look like you've seen a ghost. Michael and Emma exchanged glances. They needed to tell her something, but not enough to frighten her unnecessarily. Mom, Michael said carefully. We may have a situation. Some people who aren't happy about the Westridge case might be watching the house. Mrs. Anderson paled slightly but maintained her composure. Those awful people. But I thought they were all in prison. Not all of them, apparently, Michael said, grimly. And I don't think I should stay here. Mom, it's not safe for you and Dad. Where will you go? Mrs. Anderson asked, practical even in her concern, but Michael hesitated, clearly not having thought that far ahead. His eyes flickered to Emma, then away, not presuming anything. He can come to my place, Emma heard herself say. No one would look for him there. They don't know about me, about our ... history. Michael looked at her in surprise. Emma, you don't have to. It's the safest option, she interrupted, making it clear this was a practical decision. Not an emotional one, just until we figure out what's happening and who's watching you. Mrs. Anderson looked between them, understanding dawning in her eyes. I think that's a wonderful idea, she said, a hint of hope in her voice that made Emma want to clarify that this wasn't a reconciliation, just a temporary safety measure. But there wasn't time for explanations. They needed to move quickly, before the men watching the house could react. We'll need to be careful leaving, Emma said. And we should call Lily, let her know what's happening. As they began making plans, Emma wondered what exactly she'd just volunteered for, sheltering Michael in her small apartment, the two of them alone together for the first time in 5 years. The practical choice, yes, but also, perhaps, the most dangerous one for her heart. Getting Michael out of his parents' house undetected required more subterfuge than Emma had anticipated. They waited until dusk, when Mrs. Anderson drove her car, ostentatiously out of the garage, and to her book club, a diversion to draw the watcher's attention. Meanwhile, Mr. Anderson, who had returned home and been briefed on the situation, helped Michael through Mrs. Keller's yard to where Emma had parked several blocks away. The plan worked. By the time they reached Emma's apartment building, on the other side of the city, night had fallen completely, and Emma was reasonably confident they hadn't been followed. Home sweet home, she said, unlocking her door with a strange mix of anxiety and déjà vu. It felt surreal to be bringing Michael into her space, a space he'd never seen, that contained no trace of their shared past. Michael entered slowly, leaning heavily on his cane. The drive had clearly exhausted him, reminding Emma that he was still recovering from serious injuries. Hospital discharge or not, he needed rest and care. You can take the bedroom, Emma said, gesturing to the door on the left. I'll sleep on the couch. Absolutely not, Michael protested. I've already imposed enough. The couch is fine for me. You're recovering from internal injuries and broken ribs, Emma countered, slipping into nurse mode. You need proper rest, on a supportive mattress. This isn't a discussion. A ghost of a smile touched Michael's lips. Still stubborn, I see. Still right, Emma corrected. But she found herself smiling too. A brief moment of familiarity in the strangeness of their situation. She showed him around the small apartment, kitchen, bathroom, bedroom. It didn't take long. The place was a fraction of the size of the home they'd once shared. It's nice, Michael said, studying the simple, clean decor. Feels like you. Emma wondered what he meant by that, how he could claim to know what felt like her after 5 years apart. She'd changed in ways he couldn't begin to understand, or had she? Sometimes, catching a glimpse of her reflection unexpectedly, she still saw the woman she'd been with him, buried beneath the layers of independence she'd built. Are you hungry? She asked, changing the subject. I can make pasta. Or we could order in. Anything is fine, Michael said, lowering himself carefully onto a kitchen chair. Emma, we need to talk about what happens next, about these people watching the house. Emma nodded, filling a pot with water for pasta. You said they might be connected to the Westridge case. People who weren't caught in the initial investigation. Yes, the main architects of the fraud are in prison, but they had connections, other financial firms, possibly even organized crime, people who helped launder the money, who benefited from the scheme. And they're still angry about what you did, Emma concluded, still holding a grudge after all this time. It's not just anger, Michael explained, his voice tight. It's fear. I know, things, account numbers, contacts, operations that weren't part of the main trial, information that could still hurt them. Emma set the pot on the stove, turning to face him. Then why not give that information to the authorities? Get these people arrested too, because it wasn't relevant to the main case. Because some of it is just suspicions, patterns I noticed but couldn't prove. Michael sighed. And because I was tired of running, of looking over my shoulder. I wanted my life back, Emma. I wanted. He didn't finish, but he didn't need to. Emma knew what he had wanted, who he had wanted to find again. So what do we do now? She asked. I need to call a contact at the FBI, Michael said. Someone who worked on the original case. Let them know what's happening. You trust them? Emma asked. As much as I trust anyone in law enforcement, Michael said wryly. She helped protect me during the trial, got me into a temporary witness protection program. Emma hadn't known about that, another piece of the puzzle that was Michael's life during their separation. Use my phone, she offered, in case yours is being monitored. While Michael made the call in the living room, Emma finished preparing a simple dinner: pasta with a jar of sauce, a bagged salad, bread from the freezer. Nothing fancy, but nourishing. Her nurse's instincts guided her, focusing on what Michael's healing body needed. When he returned to the kitchen, his expression was slightly more relaxed. Agent Ramirez is going to look into it, he reported. She's checking if anyone connected to the case has been released recently, or if there's been any unusual activity around the known associates. That's good, Emma said, setting plates on the small table. What about your parents? Will they be safe? Dad's calling in a favor with a friend who owns a security company. They'll have someone watching the house tonight, and tomorrow they're going to their condo in Florida for a while, just to be safe. Emma nodded, relief washing through her. She'd been worried about the elder Andersons, especially since she'd been the one to discover the threat. They ate in a strange, companionable silence, both aware of the surreal nature of their situation. 5 years of separation, and now here they were, sharing a meal in Emma's kitchen, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. This is good, Michael said, breaking the silence. Thank you. For dinner, and for everything today. For warning me, for helping me get out safely. Anyone would have done the same. Emma demurred. No, Michael shook his head. Most people would have walked away. Especially someone I'd hurt the way I hurt you. Emma set down her fork, meeting his gaze. I'm a nurse, Michael. I don't ignore people in danger, regardless of my personal feelings. Is that all this is? He asked quietly. Professional obligation. The question hung in the air between them, demanding an honesty Emma wasn't sure she was ready to give. She looked away, buying time by taking a sip of water. I don't know, she finally admitted. I don't know what this is, or what I feel anymore. Everything's happening so fast. Michael nodded, accepting her answer without pushing. I understand, and I'm not asking for anything, Emma. Just ... thank you. For being the kind of person who helps, even when it's hard. After dinner, Emma set Michael up in her bedroom with clean towels, a spare toothbrush, and a t-shirt of her father's she sometimes slept in that might fit him. The domesticity of it all felt both foreign and familiar, like speaking a language she'd once been fluent in but had fallen out of practice. If you need anything in the night, just call out, she told him. I'm a light sleeper. I remember, Michael said softly. And the simple statement sent a cascade of memories through Emma. Nights when he'd gotten up for water and returned to find her awake. Nights when she'd jolted from sleep at the slightest sound and he'd pulled her close, murmuring reassurances. Good night, Michael, she said, retreating to the door. Good night, Emma, he replied, his eyes holding hers for a moment too long, saying things his voice did not dot. As she closed the door, Emma leaned against it, heart hammering in her chest. What was she doing? Bringing him into her home, caring for him, falling back into the comfortable rhythms they'd once shared. It was dangerous territory, especially with her feelings still so confused, so raw. Yet as she made up the couch with sheets and a spare blanket, Emma couldn't deny a strange sense of rightness beneath the awkwardness and uncertainty, as if something long out of alignment had shifted back into place. Whether that was a good thing or not remained to be seen. Emma woke to the sound of movement in her kitchen. For a disorienting moment, she forgot Michael was there, and her heart rate spiked with alarm. Then memory returned, and with it a different kind of anxiety. She sat up on the couch, running a hand through her sleep-mussed hair. The digital clock on her cable box read 6:47 a.m. early, but not unreasonably so. She had the day off, thankfully. One less complication to navigate. Sorry if I woke you, Michael said from the kitchen doorway. He was leaning on his cane, wearing the t-shirt she'd given him, and his own pajama pants. I was trying to be quiet. It's fine, Emma said, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders like a shawl. I'm usually up by now anyway. How did you sleep? Better than I have in a while, Michael admitted. Your bed is more comfortable than the hospital, and he hesitated, then finished. And I felt safe here. The simple statement carried weight, reminding Emma that for 5 years, Michael had rarely felt safe anywhere, always looking over his shoulder, always prepared to run. I was making coffee, he added. I hope that's okay. I remember how you like it. You remember how I like my coffee? Emma asked, surprised by this small detail he'd retained. Strong, with just a splash of milk. No sugar. Michael smiled slightly. Some things you don't forget. Emma wasn't sure how to respond to that, to the implication that he'd held on to the minutiae of their life together, even as he'd been forced to abandon the life itself. Coffee sounds good, she said instead, standing and moving to the bathroom. I'll just be a minute. When she emerged, face washed and teeth brushed, Michael had 2 mugs of coffee on the small kitchen table. He'd also found bread and was making toast. I hope this is okay, he said, gesturing to the simple breakfast preparations. I wanted to do something useful. It's fine, Emma assured him, taking a seat and accepting the mug he pushed toward her. The coffee was perfect, exactly as she liked it. Of course it was. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before Michael's phone rang. He checked the screen, then answered quickly. Agent Ramirez, he said by way of greeting, then listened intently for several minutes, his expression growing increasingly grave. I see. Yes, that makes sense. And the security at my parents' house. Good, good. What about yes? Of course. I understand. Thank you for calling. He hung up, setting the phone down carefully. That was my FBI contact, he told Emma unnecessarily. She's identified at least one of the men watching the house. Frank Donovan, a known associate of Victor Mercer. Who's Victor Mercer? Emma asked. One of the people who got away during the original investigation. A middleman between West and various shell companies used to hide the stolen funds. Michael took a sip of coffee, his hand not quite steady. He was in Europe during the indictments, and there wasn't enough evidence to extradite him, but apparently he's back in the country. And looking for you, Emma concluded. Looking for the evidence I might still have against him, Michael corrected. Agent Ramirez thinks they're hoping I kept records, documentation that wasn't part of the original case. Did you? Emma asked. Both. Michael hesitated, then nodded. Some encrypted files, account numbers, dates, names, nothing concrete enough for criminal charges at the time, but potentially damaging if connected to new evidence. And they think you still have this information. They know I do, Michael said grimly. Because I told their lawyers I did, during a deposition 3 years ago. It was a bluff, meant to pressure them into testifying against the bigger players. But it worked too well. They believe I have a smoking gun that could bring down Mercer and his entire operation. Emma absorbed this, a chill running through her. No wonder these people were still after Michael, still willing to hurt him to protect themselves. What happens now? She asked. Agent Ramirez is putting together a protection detail. They'll take me to a safe house while they try to locate and arrest Donovan and anyone working with him. Michael looked down at his coffee. I should be gone by tonight. You'll be safe then. The thought of Michael leaving again, disappearing into some government protection program, sent a spike of something like panic through Emma, which was ridiculous. She'd lived 5 years without him, had built a life, had convinced herself she was better off alone. And then what? She asked, trying to keep her voice neutral. Another 5 years of hiding, of looking over your shoulder. No, Michael said firmly. I'm done running. I'm going to give them everything I have on Mercer. Work with the FBI to build a case. End this once and for all. Is that safe? Emma couldn't keep the concern from her voice. Safer than the alternative, Michael said. I can't live like this anymore, Emma. I want my life back. He met her eyes. Whatever that looks like now. The implication was clear. He wanted a chance at a life that included her, if she was willing. But he wasn't pushing, wasn't assuming. Before Emma could respond, Michael's phone rang again. He answered, listened briefly, then his face went pale. When? He demanded. Are they sure? Yes, of course. Thank you. He hung up, his expression grim. They found Donovan's car abandoned near the hospital, and a witness reported seeing someone matching his description entering this building about 20 minutes ago. Emma felt the blood drain from her face. This building? Are you sure? The description matches. Dark suit, heavy-set, early 50s. Michael was already standing, moving toward the bedroom with surprising speed despite his injuries. We need to leave now. Emma followed, her mind racing. How could they have found us? We were so careful. They must have followed your car from the hospital yesterday, before we left my parents' house. Been watching since then. Michael was gathering his clothes, the few belongings he'd brought. I'm so sorry, Emma. I never should have involved you in this. I involved myself, Emma reminded him, grabbing a backpack from her closet and beginning to throw in essentials: medication, a change of clothes, her wallet, phone charger. What's the plan? Where do we go? Agent Ramirez is sending someone, but they're at least 30 minutes out. Michael pulled on a sweater over his t-shirt, wincing as the movement pulled at his healing ribs. We need somewhere safe to wait. Emma thought quickly. The hospital. I can get us into secure areas with my ID. We can hide there until your FBI friends arrive. Michael nodded. Good thinking, but we need to be careful leaving. If Donovan is in the building. As if on cue, a heavy knock sounded at the apartment door. Emma and Michael froze, exchanging alarmed glances. Ms. Williams, a male voice called. Building maintenance. We've had a report of a water leak in this unit. Maintenance wouldn't know my name, Emma whispered. The super would, but not regular maintenance. Michael nodded, his expression hardening. He gestured toward the bathroom, then mimed opening a window. Emma understood immediately. Her bathroom window led to a fire escape, a tight fit, but possible. Silently they moved to the bathroom, closing and locking the door behind them. Emma opened the small window as quietly as possible while Michael texted Agent Ramirez their situation and new destination. The knocking at the front door grew louder, more insistent. Ms. Williams, I need to check your bathroom specifically. Please open up. Emma handed her backpack to Michael, then helped him maneuver his injured body through the window. It was clearly painful for him, but he managed without making a sound. She followed quickly, pulling the window mostly closed behind her. The fire escape was old but sturdy, zigzagging down the side of the building to the alley below. They descended as quickly as Michael's injuries would allow, Emma supporting him when he struggled with the stairs. They had just reached the alley when they heard the crash of a door being forced open above them. Run, Michael said urgently. My car is 3 blocks east. Hand in hand, they fled down the alley, Emma matching her pace to Michael's labored steps. Behind them, a shout indicated they'd been spotted. The chase was on. Emma's heart pounded as they emerged from the alley onto a busy street. Morning commuters hurried past, none aware of the danger pursuing them. Michael was breathing heavily, his face pale with pain and exertion. The fire escape descent had clearly aggravated his injuries. We need to blend in, Emma said, slowing their pace to a brisk walk rather than a suspicious run. She looped her arm through Michael's, making them look like any other couple out for a morning stroll. His cane helped complete the picture of normalcy. 3 more blocks, Michael said through gritted teeth. Black sedan parked near the coffee shop. Emma glanced behind them. No sign of pursuit yet, but that didn't mean they were safe. Donovan might have returned to his car, might be circling the block, looking for them. Agent Ramirez says local police are on their way, Michael added, checking his phone. They'll meet us at the hospital. They continued walking, maintaining their casual facade while scanning constantly for threats. Emma was acutely aware of Michael's labored breathing, the way he leaned more heavily on his cane with each step. You're in pain, she observed quietly. I'm fine, he insisted. You're not fine, Emma countered. Your body is still healing from major trauma. This kind of stress and exertion could cause serious setbacks, better setbacks than bullets, Michael said grimly. They were approaching the corner where Michael had said his car was parked when Emma spotted a familiar figure across the street, the heavy-set man in the expensive suits, Donovan, scanning the sidewalks with predatory focus. Don't look, Emma whispered, turning Michael slightly away. He's across the street, hasn't seen us yet. Michael tensed beneath her hand but kept his face averted. We need a diversion, he murmured, something to draw his attention away while we get to the car. Emma looked around desperately, searching for anything that might help. Her gaze landed on a construction site ahead, where workers were preparing for the day's labor. An idea formed. Keep walking, she instructed. When we reach the construction site, be ready to move quickly to your car. Michael nodded, trusting her without question. They continued their careful pace, Emma's mind racing through the details of her hastily formed plan. As they approached the construction site, Emma pretended to stumble, crying out loudly enough to draw attention. Several construction workers looked over as she apologized theatrically to Michael, making a scene. Now, she whispered, and they ducked into the construction zone, moving swiftly behind a stack of materials toward the street where Michael's car waited. Behind them, Emma heard shouts as the site foreman noticed their unauthorized presence. The commotion was perfect, drawing attention without revealing their purpose. They reached Michael's car just as Donovan spotted the disturbance at the construction site. While his attention was diverted, they slipped into the vehicle, Michael's hands shaking slightly as he started the engine. That was brilliant, he said, pulling smoothly into traffic. Quick thinking, just drive, Emma replied, watching the rearview mirror anxiously. Head toward the hospital. Michael navigated through morning traffic with tense focus, taking a circuitous route to ensure they weren't followed. Emma kept watch, alert for any sign of pursuit. while texting updates to Agent Ramirez using Michael's phone. Police have been alerted, she reported. They'll meet us at the emergency entrance. Michael nodded, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Emma, I'm so sorry about all this. You should never have been involved. Stop apologizing, Emma said firmly. This isn't your fault. You exposed criminals who stole from innocent people. They're the ones who should be sorry, not you. Michael glanced at her, surprise and gratitude in his eyes. Still, I never wanted to put you in danger. 5 years ago, or now. I know, Emma said softly. I understand that now. The simple statement hung between them, weighted with forgiveness, not yet fully articulated but beginning to take form, as they approached the hospital. Emma directed Michael to the emergency entrance where ambulances arrived, a secure area with hospital security and surveillance cameras. 2 police cruisers were already waiting, officers standing alert beside their vehicles. Relief washed through Emma at the sight. They were going to make it. They were going to be safe. Michael parked near the police cars, and officers immediately approached, one opening Emma's door while another spoke to Michael through his window. Mr. Anderson, I'm Officer Chen. Agent Ramirez sent us. You both all right? Yes, Michael confirmed, but we were followed earlier. A man named Frank Donovan. He broke into Ms. Williams' apartment. The officer nodded. We have units searching the area now. In the meantime, we're going to escort you inside to a secure area. As they exited the car, Emma noticed Michael wince, his hand going to his side. You need to be examined, she said, professional concern overtaking personal emotion. Your ribs. Later, Michael started to protest, but Emma fixed him with her nurse's stare. Now, she corrected firmly, you're already a patient here. It won't seem suspicious if you're examined, and you clearly need medical attention. Officer, Chen agreed. It's a good cover too. Easier to secure a patient room than an administrative office. Michael relented, allowing Emma and the officers to escort him into the emergency department. Emma's colleague Gloria was working triage and raised her eyebrows at the sight of them surrounded by police. Michael needs to be seen, Emma explained, keeping her voice professional. Possible complication from his recent injuries. And we need a private room. Gloria, bless her, didn't ask questions. She simply nodded and directed them to a treatment room at the far end of the department, away from the main activity. Once inside, with officers posted outside the door, Emma finally allowed herself to breathe. They'd made it. For the moment, they were safe. Michael sank onto the examination bed, exhaustion etched in every line of his face. Thank you, he said quietly. For everything back there, the quick thinking, the diversion. Just returning the favor, Emma replied. You saved me once. Now I've saved you. Michael looked up, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Are we even, then? He asked softly. Emma held his gaze, understanding the real question beneath his words. Were they settling accounts, closing books, or was this the beginning of something new? I don't know, she answered honestly, but I think we might be starting to find out. The next several hours passed in a blur of activity. Dr. Karim examined Michael, confirming Emma's suspicion that he'd re-injured his ribs during their escape. She ordered pain medication and rest, her eyes flickering curiously between Michael and Emma, but asking no personal questions. Hospital security worked with the police to establish a perimeter, limiting access to their section of the emergency department. Emma used her badge to move freely, gathering supplies for Michael and information about what was happening outside. By mid-afternoon, Agent Ramirez arrived, a compact woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She spoke with Michael privately for nearly an hour while Emma waited outside with the officers. Frank Donovan has been located and arrested, Agent Ramirez reported when she finally emerged. We found him still searching the area near your apartment, Ms. Williams. He had a weapon. Emma shivered at the confirmation of how much danger they'd been in. What about the others? The man watching Michael's parents' house? Also in custody, Agent Ramirez confirmed. And we have teams tracking Victor Mercer's movements. He entered the country 3 days ago using a false passport. But we have facial recognition hits from security cameras at a hotel downtown. So it's over? Emma asked, hardly daring to hope. Not quite, Agent Ramirez said. Mercer is still at large, and he's the one calling the shots, but we're closing in. She glanced at the closed door of Michael's room. I've convinced Mr. Anderson to enter protective custody until Mercer is apprehended. A safe house has been arranged. Emma nodded, a strange hollowness forming in her chest at the thought of Michael disappearing again, even if this time it would be with proper protection, a known location. When she asked, "Tonight, after dark, safer to move him then?" Agent Ramirez studied Emma's face. "He's asked if you would consider coming too, for your own protection." The request surprised Emma. "Me, but I'm not a witness. I don't have any information they want." "No, but you're connected to him now. They've seen you together." "No, you've helped him escape. That makes you a potential target, or at least leverage they could use against him." Emma hadn't considered that. The thought of being used to hurt Michael, to force his cooperation, was chilling. "I have a job," she said. "A life here. It would be temporary," Agent Ramirez assured her. "Just until we apprehend Mercer. A few days, maybe a week." She paused. "Of course, it's your decision. We can arrange protection for you here if you prefer." Emma hesitated, torn between practical concerns and emotions she was still sorting through. Going with Michael to a safe house would mean days in close proximity. No distractions, no ability to maintain the careful distance she'd been trying to preserve. "Can I think about it?" she asked. "Of course, but we'll need an answer by 7 tonight." Agent Ramirez handed her a card. "Call me when you decide." After the agent left, Emma returned to Michael's room. He was sitting up in bed, looking more comfortable now that his pain was being managed, but his expression was troubled. "Ramirez told you about the safe house," he said. "It wasn't a question." "Yes." Emma took the chair beside his bed. "And about your invitation?" Michael nodded, his eyes on his hands. "I shouldn't have asked. It's not fair to you. But the thought of them coming after you because of me. I understand," Emma said. "And I appreciate your concern. But you're not coming," Michael concluded, resignation in his voice. "I didn't say that." Emma surprised herself with the response. "I said, I'm thinking about it." Hope flickered in Michael's eyes. "Really, it makes practical sense," Emma said carefully. "If these people really might target me, only practical sense." Michael asked softly. Emma met his gaze. "What do you want me to say, Michael?" "That I want to spend days alone with you in a safe house sorting through 5 years of hurt and confusion. That I'm ready to pick up where we left off, as if nothing happened." "No," Michael said, "not as if nothing happened. We can't go back to who we were before. Too much has changed." He reached for her hand, and after a brief hesitation, she allowed him to take it. "But maybe we could see who we are now, if there's still something worth building on." The touch of his hand, warm and familiar around hers, sent a cascade of memories through Emma. Their first date, their wedding day, quiet mornings and passionate nights. The thousand small touches that had defined their life together. "I don't know if I can trust this," Emma admitted. "Trust you. Trust us. It was so hard, Michael, rebuilding myself after you left." "I know," Michael said, his voice thick with regret. "And I'm so proud of who you've become, Emma. So impressed by your strength, your compassion, your resilience." His thumb traced gentle patterns on her palm. "I'm not asking you to give up any of that. Just to consider that maybe there's room in your life for me too. In whatever way feels right." Emma looked at their joined hands, at the wedding ring Michael still wore, at the empty space on her own finger where hers had once been. She'd removed it 3 years after he left, put it away in a jewelry box she rarely opened. "I'll go to the safe house," she said finally, "for practical reasons, and maybe, to see what happens next." Relief and cautious hope washed over Michael's face. "Thank you," he said simply. Emma withdrew her hand gently, needing some space to process her own decision. "I should call Agent Ramirez, let her know. And I need to talk to Gloria about emergency leave from work." Michael nodded. "Of course." At the door, Emma paused, looking back at him. "This isn't a promise, Michael. I'm not saying we have a future together. I'm just saying I'm willing to find out if we might." "That's all I'm asking for," Michael said. "A chance. That's more than I ever thought I'd get again." As Emma left to make her arrangements, a strange sense of rightness settled over her, surprising in its clarity. She didn't know what would happen in the coming days, whether they would recapture what they'd lost or confirm that too much had changed. But for the first time in 5 years, she was facing the question directly rather than burying it beneath layers of protective denial. Answer, whatever it might be, would finally allow her to move forward with or without Michael, but on her own terms, with clear eyes and an open heart. 6 months later, Emma sat on a park bench, watching fallen leaves dance across the pathway in the autumn breeze, the same park where she and Michael had once fed ducks, planned their future, shared dreams that had seemed so certain, then thought so much had changed since that day she'd discovered Michael in room 217. His life depending on her blood. So much had healed. The week in the safe house had been intense, long conversations, stretching into the night. Painful truths excavated, tears shed by both of them. They'd had nowhere to hide from each other, no distractions to blur the sharp edges of their shared history. By the third day, Emma had found herself laughing at one of Michael's jokes, the sound surprising them both with its authenticity. By the fifth day, they'd fallen asleep on the couch together, her head on his shoulder, as they watched an old movie they'd both loved. Nothing physical beyond that they were still finding their way back to each other, still cautious of old wounds, but something had shifted, walls crumbling slowly but surely between them. On the seventh day, news had come. Victor Mercer had been arrested trying to leave the country. The danger was over. They were free to return to their lives, except Emma had realized, somewhere in those 7 days of enforced proximity, that her life and Michael's had begun to intertwine again. Tentative new growth sprouting from roots that had never fully died. The months since had been a careful dance of rediscovery. Michael had moved into his own apartment, giving Emma the space she needed, while making it clear he was committed to rebuilding what they'd lost. If she wanted that too, they'd dated. As strange as that had seemed at first, dinner at restaurants they'd never visited together, movies neither had seen, conversations about the people they'd become in their years apart. Sometimes it felt like meeting a stranger. Other times, like reuniting with the most familiar person in her world. Emma checked her watch. Michael would be arriving soon. Today marked exactly 6 months since that fateful discovery in the hospital, and they'd planned a picnic to commemorate it, not as an anniversary exactly, but as an acknowledgement of how far they'd come. Saw him before he saw her walking along the path. No cane needed now, his stride confident and relaxed. He'd gained back the weight he'd lost during his years on the run, his face fuller, eyes brighter. He looked like himself again, or rather, like the new self he'd become, still Michael, but shaped by everything he'd endured. He spotted her and smiled. That smile that still made her heart skip, despite her best efforts at emotional caution. He was carrying a picnic basket. He'd insisted on preparing everything himself, a reversal of their early dating years when Emma had done most of the cooking. "Hey," he said, sitting beside her on the bench. "Beautiful day." "Perfect," Emma agreed, helping him spread a blanket on the grass. "How was your meeting?" Michael had started consulting for a financial ethics watchdog group, using his experience to help prevent others from falling victim to the kind of fraud he'd exposed. "Good," he said. "We're making progress on the new regulatory framework, and the Victim Compensation Fund is finally being dispersed." Emma smiled, genuinely proud of the work he was doing, turning trauma into purpose, pain into protection for others. They settled on the blanket, and Michael began unpacking the basket: cheese, bread, fruit, and a bottle of sparkling cider. No wine. They both preferred clarity these days, sharp edges of reality rather than softened perceptions. "I saw Lily yesterday," Emma mentioned, accepting a plate from him. "She's thinking of moving back to Seattle." "I know," Michael nodded. "She thinks I don't need her hovering anymore." A small smile. "She says I have you for that now." Emma rolled her eyes, but there was no real irritation in it. "I don't hover. I observe with professional interest." "Of course," Michael agreed, too quickly to be sincere, purely professional. Their banter had returned gradually over the months, comfortable and warm, though now layered with new understanding, new respect. They ate in companionable silence, for a while, watching children play nearby, a dog chasing a frisbee, ordinary life unfolding around them, the kind of ordinary moments they'd both learned to treasure. "I've been thinking," Michael said finally, setting down his plate, "about us, about what happens next." Emma felt a flutter of nervous anticipation. They'd been moving slowly, deliberately, both afraid of rushing into something neither was ready for, but lately, she'd felt a shift, a readiness stirring in her heart. "What about us?" she asked. Michael reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Emma's breath caught. Not a ring box, too large for that, but significant nonetheless. "This isn't a proposal," he said quickly, seeing her expression. "Not yet. That's something I hope we'll discuss when we're both ready." He opened the box. Inside was a key. "This is to my apartment. he explained. I want you to have it. Not to move in unless you want to, someday, but as a symbol that I'm not hiding anymore, that my door is always open to you, that I trust you with every part of my life. Emma stared at the key, emotion welling in her throat. Such a simple thing, yet so laden with meaning after years of locked doors between them, physical and emotional. I have something for you too, she said softly. She reached into her bag and withdrew a small object wrapped in tissue paper. It's not as practical as a key, but ... Michael unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a small glass vial on a silver chain, containing a single drop of red liquid suspended in clear resin. Is this, he asked, voice hushed. My blood, Emma confirmed, a symbolic drop. The nurse who took it thought I was crazy, but ... double quotes, she shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. It seemed right somehow. Michael stared at the vial, then at Emma, his eyes bright with unshed tears. Your blood saved my life, he said, in more ways than one. And your love saved mine, Emma replied, the admission easier now than it would have been months ago. Even when I didn't know it, even when it hurt. Michael slipped the chain over his head, the vial resting against his heart where her blood had once flowed, keeping him alive when all seemed lost. Where do we go from here? He asked, the question that had hovered between them for months. Emma took the key from the box, curling her fingers around it. Forward, she said simply. Together. Michael's hand found hers on the blanket, fingers intertwining his wedding ring, still there. A constancy that had once bewildered her but now felt like a promise kept against impossible odds. I can't promise it will be easy, he said. We both have scars, habits of self-protection that won't disappear overnight. I know, Emma acknowledged, but I think we're stronger now, both of us, strong enough to try again, with open eyes. Around them, the park continued its timeless rhythms, seasons changing, children growing, life moving inexorably forward. Once, they had been part of that flow, together, then apart, streams diverging, now, perhaps, converging again, altered by their separate journeys, but still, at their core, the same waters. Emma leaned against Michael's shoulder, feeling his arms slip around her with the careful tenderness of someone who knows both the fragility and resilience of what he holds. Your blood in my veins, he murmured. A part of you, keeping me alive. And a part of you, Emma replied, still beating in my heart. After everything, it wasn't a happily ever after. They were too wise now for such fairy tales. But it was a beginning again, a second chance, built not on naive hope, but on hard-won understanding, on forgiveness, freely given, on love that had endured the unendurable, and emerged, improbably, still beating, like blood returned to the heart after a long journey through the body, changed by what it had encountered but still essential, still life-giving, still exactly where it belonged.